Hello there everybody, Sam's Trains here and welcome back to the railway. I told myself over 2 years ago that I would not buy the Hornby APT train pack until the price dropped below the £300 mark. And it's been a long and painful wait, but finally it's paid off. So here comes the review. Even if you're not a fan of trains of this era, there's no denying that the APT was totally unique and iconic. It really was the train of the future in the late 1970s. So needless to say, when Hornby released this, I really fancied one. But if I'd bought a pack, there's a real chance I wouldn't have been able to keep the lights on around here because they were just farcically expensive. So the train pack at its full price is £519.99 or about £475 at the retailers, and that's just for the 5-car pack. So depending on whether you're paying the full RRP or the reduced retailer price, you're talking just over or just under £100 per car, and most of those cars are just coaches. But that's just the 5-car pack. Like I say, the real APT had units made up of 7 cars, so to get the extra couple of cars you're talking an extra £100, and at that point you're only halfway there because the real trains were made up of 2 units, so that's 14 cars. So what are we talking now, over £1,000, and that's just for the analogue train. If you wanted to chip this, add DCC, goodness knows how many decoders you'd need, because you need 3 for the 5-car set. So yeah, wildly expensive. I told myself, no, I'm just going to wait for the prices to come down. And with prices like that, it is no surprise that almost the entire range has now been reduced. So at Rails, I was able to pick this up for £295. That is a real bargain, and the extra coaches are even more heavily reduced at better than half price now. So finally, a couple of years on, I finally decided to get one of these, and we'll see what this is actually like. I've heard mixed things. Some people think they're great. I've heard other people say that actually they're not powerful enough to haul a full 14 length train and that they derail on tight curves and stuff. I don't know what's true. I suppose that does fill me with a bit of trepidation given my layout, but I'm willing to give it a try. If you're interested in this as well, I'll pop an affiliate link down in the description. If these haven't sold within 2 years, I doubt Hornby are going to do another run of these anytime soon. So if this is something like me you fancied, now is probably the time to get one, if it's any good. It's £300, that's a bargain. It's still a lot of money. So is it worth it? Let's find out. So like I say, this is just a 5-car train pack, so it's actually only about 1/3 of the length of a real train, but I suppose this is a much more affordable and practical way to give people a taste of the APT without them having to buy the entire train, although you can do that if you want to. So let me show you the end of the box here. So the product code for what I've got is R30104. It is the BR Class 370 Advanced Passenger Train, and like I say, it's the 5-car train pack. It's DCC ready with 21-pin DCC sockets. And from what I've read, there are 3 DCC sockets in here. I don't know yet, we'll find out for sure, but I assume that those 3 decoders are for the lighting in each of the end cars, and then for the motor in the power car. I guess that's how it's going to work. We'll find out for sure in just a second. If I show you the back of the box, you can see what we get in this pack at the top, and then we've got some of the extra coaches you can buy down at the bottom if you did want to make up the full set. So with that, after all this time, I'm finally going to open this up and see whether this is actually any good. Obviously for, well, over £500 at the full price, you'd expect great things from this. So I am excited, A tilting train, of course, in real life, and I hear the models will indeed tilt. So again, that's something I'm really curious to see. All right, no big reveal just yet, but I do have these instructions. All right, the Class 370 Advanced Passenger Train. Not learnt anything about the mechanisms on this thing yet. All right, goodness me. So coupling sequence, that's really useful. So I'm gonna have to keep this around. We can see we've got the 5-car arrangement at the top there. You can do a 7-car, which is 1 unit, and 14 cars, which is 2 units back to back. lubrication, so you can see that this is the motor car, and we've got all wheels driven on there, so it's kind of like your typical sort of diesel in terms of the drive. Body removal, so this looks fun, doesn't it? To remove the body, the pantograph must first be taken out. You undo 2 screws for that, then you turn it upside down, remove the screws, and the body comes off, and as you can see, this is how the thing runs. I can't see a motor on there. Is it me? Or I can see what looks like a drive shaft. I don't know. It's a confusing drawing, but there will be a motor there. And then here's how you chip these. So actually, it doesn't look like you have to remove the bodies to do this. Looks like there's panels on the underside of the relevant cars, which you can unscrew, remove, and then you've got the sockets. So you don't have to remove the pantographs then for chipping. That's useful. Don't know if speakers come pre-fitted, but there is a location there for a sugar cube. We'll check later on whether it comes with one. Pantographs, yeah, just some basic instructions on how to raise and lower those. And that is all she wrote. So with that, is there anything else to look at before I delve in? No, we've got 2 egg boxes and they're taped down, so I'll grab Rusty and we'll get ourselves in. All right, so let's cut in. Oh, it just came away in my hands. Okay, sorry Rusty, once again, you are surplus to requirements. Ooh, look at that. Doesn't this just scream 1970s? I think it's the sort of beige of the underframe and the roof. I mean, yeah, you've got to love it. I wasn't around during this time, but seeing this somehow makes me nostalgic. It's bizarre, isn't it? Right, let's pull some of these out then. We'll start with one of the end cars here. I'll do this carefully. I don't know how sort of fragile and detailed these are, but yeah, it looks reasonably. So as you can see, these cars are kind of an articulated design, so some bogies are shared between 2 cars, and so we've got these massively large wheelbase bogies here. Obviously it's not connected at the other end, and you can see we've got wiper pickups on those wheels, and we've also got wiper pickups on the other bogie as well. I'm sorry, I just can't help myself getting technical straight away. But yeah, here is the end car. It does look great, I must say. I've seen the much older Hornby APT, and this certainly does blow it out the water. Yeah, I can't wait to get a proper look at this. But yeah, there's that. There's obviously much more to look at. So let's look at the opposite driving car, which I assume will be more or less the same thing. And yes, it is. So there we go. This is what you put at the other end. Yeah, quite nicely made, I have to say. Not much weight to it. But of course, this isn't actually a driving car, it's just a trailer, so that makes sense. And then we've got one of the middle coaches here, which only has 1 bogie on it, I notice. And that's because it'll connect up to one of the other sort of end cars. So there we have it, passenger coach, looks good. Seems like we've got some interior and a fair bit of detailing on the body, although not much of it separately fitted. It does seem to be relatively simple, actually. So again, I think I was right not to want to pay full price for all of this stuff, but I think we all knew that anyway. And that's it for the top tray, so let me just put the plastic inside and we'll see what we've got underneath. I think the business end will be somewhere in here because we've not seen the driving car yet. And I think I will need Rusty this time because this is all stuck down. Okay, cheers Rust. Okay, that's right, so 2 more cars. This is obviously the weighty one because it's in a blister pack. So let's take a look at the final coach first, which looks more or less like a mirror of what we've just seen, unless I'm missing something. So there you have it. Yep, same sort of thing, different number on this one, of course. And I do notice this has got a magnetic coupling on it. So we've got all the tricks in the book here. Nice. And finally, well, actually not finally, because I've just seen we've got accessories here. Although it's just a pair of alternate couplings, maybe. So that's it. No extra details to fit yourself, which is fair enough. Let's move on then and look at, well, it seems odd to call it the locomotive, but I suppose that's what it is. Let's open this up then, see what this is like. I think this is where the detail is, actually. I can see there's a lot more to this car. Anyway, we've got accessories here as well, which looks like pretty much the same accessories pack that was in the other box. So yeah, a couple more couplings. And let's open this up, see what this is like. It does look very detailed, like I say. Okay. Bit of plastic. Nice. So we've got a detailed pantograph there, which I'm not looking forward to removing. but because I take the bodies off in my reviews, I will have to. And then we've got all of this cabling on the roof, which is all beautifully separately fitted. Right, lifting up. Ooh, yeah. Yep. It's heavy. And of course it needs to be heavy because this alone has to power the entire train at high speed, plus a couple more coaches if you decide to expand the train. And when people have inclines and such on their model railway, this really needs to be as powerful as it can be. You can see we've got all-wheel drive as the diagram showed. So a very, very interesting train. We'll take a closer look at some of the details and features of this thing before, of course, getting this running for the first time. But for now, let's have a bit of background on the APT in real life. The British Rail Class 370, or the APTP, entered service for the first time in 1979, and it was known as an advanced passenger train. And advanced they were. It was the most powerful domestic train to have operated in Britain at the time, and it utilised 8 motors within the 2 central motor cars to give a massive power output of 6,000 kilowatts. Can't even imagine that amount of power. And this power translated nicely into speed, as the APT set the UK rail speed record of 162 miles per hour, a record that would stand for decades until it was eventually broken by the Eurostar Class 373. To negotiate British track work and curves at those speeds, the units would tilt on curves to reduce the lateral forces on the passengers on board. As well as fast, these trains were also massive. As I've mentioned, a full train would be made up of 2 7-car units, making a train 14 cars long, allowing them to carry an enormous number of passengers. Only 3 full sets were ever built though, and they had relatively short service lives, only being used until 1986. Most of the cars were sadly scrapped there and then, but 7 vehicles do remain today under preservation. So here's one of the driving trailers up close and personal for you, and yeah, I think Hornby have done a great job of this. The model captures the prototype beautifully. It seems miles better than the much older APT model, and to my eyes at least, the livery and choice of colour all bang on, and the detailing is everything it needs to be as well. As a non-driven car, this weighs in at 150 grams, which is probably about right for a coach, I would say. And you can see that the wheel here is riding up into the air. It looks like there's something wrong with it. Obviously though, that's just because all the weight is focused on this wheel for the moment. When I put the train together, that should go back to normal. Having said that, the real APT driving trailers are quite basic on the outside. There's not loads of different pipework and grills and components that would need to be fitted to this model, and so as a result the level of detail here is kind of similar to a Hornby Railroad Plus model. There's not loads of separate details. Now obviously this is not a problem, and do I think Hornby should have added loads of extra parts just to artificially boost the complexity? Of course not, that would be absurd. But it does mean that I think I made the right call in not paying nearly £500 for this. I think £300 or so is the right price. It does have a few features though that are better than you'd see on Hornby Railroad Plus stuff. First of all, it's got working lighting. I'm sure we'll see all of these illuminate later on. And it's also got interior lighting, as has every car in this pack, I think, except for the motorised car. So yeah, full lighting, really good to see that. I'm glad they opted for that. Let's take a look at the decoration then, which, like I say, is done really excellently. I just love the end of this. You've got the sort of 1970s beige at the bottom. You've got the yellow end, followed by the red, and the join between the two is spot on. Then you've got the slimmer white band, followed by this grey, which has a great finish on it. I love that. And then the grey section is where the windows are, and we've got the window frames painted, all the decoration done excellently. And then we've got a bit more beige on the roof towards the back. In addition, we've also got the running number and a few other prints on the side here. All of these have been done excellently. And of course, as you'd expect, we've got more details picked out, such as the door handles. We've got more window frames on the front windows, and quite a lot of detail on the bogies picked out as well. Now, these bogies are not produced to the standard of, let's say, a Cura scale. As far as I can tell, all of the detail here is just a part of the moulding, and the parts that need to stand out have just been decorated. Nothing wrong with that, of course. I think they look fine, but again, this is not a highly complex model, not one that I'd want to be spending sort of £500 on once again. The front end looks awesome. I love this kind of just slanted front. I think that's what makes the APT look so iconic. And we've also got the wiper on the front, which is a separately fitted part. The cab interior is kind of a mixed bag. There is no proper detail in here. The controls and gauges and such are moulded, but none of it's painted. I think we've seen better cabs than this, but we do have a pre-fitted driver in each end, interestingly. And he's been painted, and as you can see, he's in sort of 1970s attire. That is a really nice feature. Up on the top, we've got a separately fitted etched grille. So again, this is kind of a step up from your railroad class models. It's things like this that show that this is actually part of the Hornby Railways range. The grills on the side are just part of the moulding, as is basically the rest of the detail, really. But the moulding is good. You know, this is a recently tooled item. Yeah, all of the different moulded parts look nice and crisp. Nothing wrong with that at all. And here's a quick look at the interior. This is the driving trailer interior. You can see we've got moulded seats here and the tables. And then this is the interior of the trailer brake first. Slightly different colour scheme, slightly different layout. So yeah, there has been quite a bit of attention to detail put into this. And then let's take a look at one of the articulating bogies, for want of a better term. Yeah, very, very strange. I love the wide wheelbase. Again, this makes the APT so unique. And as you can see, the detailing is slightly different as well. Although, once again, I'm pretty sure at least most of the detail here is just a part of the moulding. And then you can see how this interfaces with the coaches. We've got a kind of ball and socket assembly here, which will allow the trailer brake first to couple onto this. And here we have the non-driving motor, which obviously looks a lot different from the other coaches. Now, I thought when I lifted this up that this was seriously heavy, and it's got a fair bit of weight to it, but when I put it on the scales and then compared it with other models, it's actually not that weighty. So it comes in at 455 grams, which is a fair amount of weight, but that is less than the EFE Rail Bully Booster, it's less than a Hornby Hush Hush, and it's even less than a Hornby Railroad A4, just to give you a few points of comparison. I don't know if that's going to be an issue. I mean, it shouldn't be a problem for the 5-car pack that I've got here, but it is worth pointing out that every single wheel on the APT has a draggy wiper pickup on it. Now, for the 5-car set, that's fine, but if you were going to try and run a 14-car train, even with an additional power car, as would be prototypical, the drag from all of these pickups is definitely going to add up. And at 14 cars, each power car will have to haul 6 coaches each, rather than 4 as in this pack. So we're talking a 50% increase. Plus, we've got the fact that these vehicles tilt on curves, which means these power cars are going to be doing work against gravity in order to tilt these vehicles. So I will be interested to see how powerful this actually is, and I'm not dreadfully surprised now that I've heard people say these are a little bit underpowered. But we'll see how this goes. Like I say, I'm sure it will be fine with the 5-car train. So yeah, this is quite a basic thing on the side, as you can see. Most of the complexity here is just in the decoration, which is excellent, as you can see, and I do like the print work as well. Yeah, once again, it's quite basic. The bogie detailing is mostly just moulded, and unfortunately the enclosure for the mechanism is very noticeable in there. You can see the sort of chassis block. We've also got handrails which are just moulded. Yeah, that's a little bit naff, isn't it, for such an expensive pack, but they are carefully decorated, so that looks fine. Here's what the corridor connectors look like. So we've got the doors here. Again, nice moulded detail on here. We've got a few components picked out with the decoration as well, including some warnings, but it's really the top of this model where most of the detail is. So as you can see, we've got all of these tiny little separately fitted insulators, which are really nicely detailed. And then we have this wire connecting them all, and I do think this is wire. Yeah, it doesn't seem to be plastic, so that's good quality, makes it nice and sturdy. We've got an etched grille here, which is nicely separately fitted. And we've even got what look like little glazed skylights, which is interesting. Another really interesting aspect of this is the pantograph. Now, as we saw when I looked at the instructions, the pantograph has to be unscrewed if you remove the body. And the reason for that is the pantograph is connected directly to the bogie. And of course that makes sense because the body tilts. And if the pantograph was attached to the body, when the body tilted, the pantograph would then sort of move out of alignment and it probably wouldn't make contact with the overhead lines anymore. So the fact that the pantograph is attached to the bogie means that that won't tilt with the rest of the train. That's very, very clever and nice to see that represented on the model. Less nice is the quality of the pantograph. This is not your sort of fine metal pantograph, it's just a plastic part. And if I carefully disengage it, you can see that it doesn't spring properly. There's no springing at all to this. If I push it down, it doesn't come back up. So that's a bit of a dead loss really. Not a pantograph that is actually going to be much good, I would say. But that's it. Hopefully that gives you a good flavour of the level of detail and the complexity of these models. Yeah, they're not dreadfully complex, so I am confused by the high price, but the build quality is excellent, the decoration's very good, and they certainly seem to have all the detail they need in order to look decent. But I'm really interested to see how this runs. Slightly nervous about it too, but I think next I need to get all of this down onto the track. We need to look at the mechanism and finally give this thing a try. So there is the APT down onto the track. This is what it all looks like together as a 5-car set, and yeah, it looks incredible. This is not really my era, it's not the era I love, but there is something just awesome looking about this. 300 quid, very, very happy. Well, 295. Anyway, I've done the initial performance testing with the motor car, and I'll show you how that went in just a second. After that, I took a close look at the mechanism, not just of the motor car, but of the other units as well. So that's what I'm going to talk about now. So I always used to say Hornby produced the best mechanisms. And over the last few years, I think the other manufacturers have caught up with them. But this set has kind of reminded me that actually, yeah, Hornby are still pretty darn good when it comes to mechanisms. And the big burning question for me was, how do these tilt? What's the mechanism like for that? Well, you might be expecting something complicated, but no, it's remarkably simple. So all it is above each bogie on the body, there are these little ramps, and a little wedge on the bogie rides up on those ramps, and that causes the body to tilt left and right. That's all it is. Every unit works like that. It's very simple, and I've not tried the whole train together yet, but for the power car, it does seem to work very well. Now, because every unit except for the motorised car is lit, every car of the APT actually has wiper pickups on it. Every single wheel, in fact, has wiper pickups on it. And that does create a lot of drag. None of these coaches are very freewheeling. So I have to think, you know, considering that you could be running up to 14 coaches here, maybe some sort of axle-based pickup would have been better, because picking up through the axles means less drag. With the wipers, a 14-coach train is going to be unimaginably heavy to haul. And of course, there's also no electrical connection between the units, which means every coach has to have its own pickups, and any coach that you actually want to have control of the lighting on needs to have its own DCC decoder socket. Now, obviously, Hornby could have solved this by running wires through each coach so that you could just power the whole train with one decoder, but of course there would have been extra cost in connecting each coach electrically like that, and it is the customer, after all, that buys the decoders, not the manufacturer. So I suppose the cynical side of me says, of course, they chose to have the multiple decoder sockets. So each of the two driving trailers has this little hatch on the bottom, which is attached with 2 screws, and this hatch was hard to piggle off, so I ended up just pulling it off with a piece of blue tack. There's a handy tip. And under there is a 21-pin DCC decoder socket, and you will have to buy a decoder for that if you want to run this on DCC, just so that you can control the directional lighting for the head and tail lights. So yeah, it's going to be quite expensive. And then of course there's a third hatch on the non-driving motor, and if you take that off in the same way, you've got your third DCC socket, 21-pin, and this is the one for the motor. There is also no speaker inside here, so yeah, it's a bit stingy. Perhaps a pre-fitted speaker wouldn't have been too much to ask given the full price of this. Anyway, I'm going to start by removing the pantograph because I do want to take the body off this motor car, and that's very easy to do. Any sort of screwdriver should slip down beside the pantograph there. It's just 2 screws as the instructions showed, and you can pull that out without too much trouble. The bogie base keeper plates are screwed on and not clipped. This is quite a rare thing to see, but this is great for servicing. You can pull those 2 screws out and the base comes off as easy as that. Unfortunately, the pickups are hardwired, so you can't pull the base away entirely, but there's enough slack on the wires so that you can easily get to the pickups to clean them. You can also see the driving axles have proper bearings fitted to them, so like I say, this is a quality mechanism. So with the pantograph already off, all I need to do now to remove the body is take out 1 screw at either end of the car. After this, the body was still clipped on, so you do have to kind of wrestle with it to get it off, but without too much trouble, off it came. And here is the die-cast chassis, which is a big metal block that fills the body almost entirely, but the whole weight of this block sits directly on top of the bogies. And that means that the body is kind of loose, as you can see, which is very odd and unusual, isn't it? Usually you don't want this, you want the body to be stable. But of course, having that feature here means that when the train tilts, it is only the body that moves, and you're not trying to tilt 400 grams of heavy chassis as well. So this is actually a fascinating design, a very clever solution, and it does work very well. And I think the thing would have really struggled if the entire chassis was tilting with the rest of the train. Anyway, you can see we've got a large 5-pole skew-wound motor here with dual flywheels on it. Yeah, it's quite a hefty motor, as well it needs to be for a train like this. And you can see it's connected to each of the 2 bogies with drive shafts. So it's very much your typical design for a diesel or an electric. The back-to-back gauging came in a little bit under gauge at 14.2mm back-to-back, but most models are a little bit under gauge and there didn't seem to be any issue with the gauge. So yeah, the mechanism on the whole is pretty clever. It's quite simple, but I think if Hornby had overcomplicated this, it would have come back to bite them. So overall, a good mechanism. Let's jump back in time and let me show you how this ran. So as far as I can tell, this motor car doesn't actually connect electrically to the rest of the train, so I'm hoping that will mean that I can run this by itself first, get it warmed up, get it running, and then introduce the load of the rest of the train a bit later on. So let's test that theory. Let's give this some juice. Forwards direction. Is it alive? Here we go. It is. Alright, it's come to life. This is its first ever run. Oh yeah, it's getting quicker already actually. Obviously at this point this has not been running, so I will have to let this run for 30 in each direction, just to make sure the motor's bedded in properly really. But yeah, it seems to be working quite nicely. Now, the big question with this thing then, is there torque in its mechanism? Obviously the thing's got to haul coaches with lots of drag, so is this powerful enough for that? Let's see, 50%. Don't think so, not at this point. No, it's barely able to turn its wheels there. So hopefully that's something that will improve, because this needs to be a powerhouse to shift all those coaches. Right, what's 50% speed like? Let's run it by half power. That's that. So reasonably sensible. Obviously these went incredibly fast, and the model can as well. Let's go past again at full speed. So yeah, fairly quick, certainly fairly quick. Now, I wonder if this can crawl. Obviously the crawl's not that crucial with this, it's a fast train, but it'd be nice if it could for when you're doing your sort of smaller station moves. So let's have a look at that. Easing up. Oh yeah, oh that's great. It would be if it could sustain it a bit more. I think it's moving, isn't it? Yeah, it's moving now. So it can really do the creep, which is good as well. Okay, other direction. Yeah, it really can. Right, so the performance on its own is great. Or at least it is on the straights. I am quite interested to see whether this tilting mechanism is going to work on second radius curves. The instructions say it shouldn't be run on anything tighter. and I've got nothing tighter than second radius, so hopefully that means this will be fine on my track. Well, let's see. Let's just try this car on its own to start with. 50%. Let's run her in. Here we go. So there it goes into the third radius. Oof, grinding noise. Second radius. Well, it slowed down a fair bit, even on the third radius. But it did it. It did not derail, and I did see the tilting there. So it does seem to work. Yeah, I'm concerned about it. That torque will need to improve quite a lot if this is going to haul 5 coaches, even 5 coaches, without slowing down dramatically. But hopefully it will do. I'll let this run in fully. Hopefully there won't be any issues. And then I'll come back, we'll couple it up to a train, and we'll see how it gets on as a 5-car train. So very interesting. I'll keep this going then, and I'll talk to you in just a second. Okay, that is running in complete, and yeah, it's official. The performance of this thing by itself is perfectly okay. Nice and smooth, sensible speed. The tilting works absolutely great, and I'll put the rest of the train on in just a second, see how it works with that, and then we'll know whether the whole set works. I suppose in some ways the kind of setup of this is quite troubling, because the motor car's in the middle, and if you were to build a 14-car train, you'd have this kind of propelling up to 6 coaches, or hauling up to 6 coaches. But the hauling part is okay. Obviously, trains are stable when they're being pulled forwards by a locomotive, but 6 coaches being pushed along at incredibly high speeds, yeah, I think there is a potential for things to be a little bit unstable there, particularly if you've got tighter curves or gradients or combinations of both. So yeah, I mean, it's realistic that this car should be driven, but I can't help but feeling maybe one of the end cars or both of the end cars could have been driven, perhaps one bogie on each, I don't know. That might have made things a little stabler, but it might not be an issue. We'll see how it goes. I'm sure with the 5-car set it'll be fine, but I'd be interested to know, for those of you who have built a 14-car set, is it stable? Can you run it at high speeds without it derailing, or is it sensitive to your track work? I don't know. Anyway, we'll put the rest of the train on in just a second. Let's just do a very brief test with this on its own again. So let me go by at 50%. This is half power. Don't think it's sped up much really, and you can really see the flywheels. If I cut that off, yeah, you can see it stops gradually. Is the torque any better than it was? Let me turn it up to 50. No, not really. So yeah, that's not great really. I mean, this isn't that heavy. I've got locos that are much heavier. The fact that this can't turn just 4 axles under an obstruction isn't great. And like I say, this thing needs its power. The crawl though was great. Let's see if it still is. Yeah, it still is. So it's a real good crawler. Let's try it in the other direction. Yeah, so it can go really slow. Okay, with that then, let me put the rest of the train on and we'll have the moment of truth. Right, here come the other 4 coaches then. First thing, I want to try these magnetic couplings. I wonder if there's a specific way that these have to go. So, does this one attract? Yeah, that one attracts. Does the other one attract? Yeah, so you can put these at either side. So I think we'll go with that. That bogey's on. Now, we need one of the driving trailers now, and the bogie at the back here is shared by the 2 units. So hopefully I'll be able to just connect these. Excuse my face while I put this down to the track level, because this is genuinely the first time I've done this. So I've got to find the hole. And does it clip in? No, I don't think it clips in. It seems to just sit on top of that, unless it needs to snap down. No, don't think it does. Okay, so that's together. So we've got a ball and socket there and a magnet there. I assume if you were to buy additional coach packs, you'd just be using ball and sockets. I think it's just the motor car that connects with magnets. So let's do the same thing, but in reverse on the other side. So magnets attracting. They are very good and strong, so unless you're accelerating the train like a madman, I don't think those magnets are going to accidentally release. Okay, put this on properly, and let's see if this couples the same. It should do. It's really quite easy to do. I thought this whole ball and socket thing would be a nightmare, but it's actually not. The wheels on. There we go. That's it. That is the 5-car train. Right, let's send it off then, and let's see if this is going to work. Here we go, 50%. Oh dear, it's struggling there, isn't it? It's a lot of drag, I thought there would be. Okay, so it's picked up speed for the curves. That tilting is awesome, look at that. Now, is it going to slow down dramatically? Yes. Oh yes, it certainly is. Okay, but it has made it, and amazingly nothing derailed, so the rumours I heard about these being unstable seem to be untrue. Obviously, with 3 times as many coaches, it could be a different story, but I think it'd be unfair for me to speculate on something I can't test. So with 5 coaches, well, 4 coaches and the motor car, yeah, it does seem to be absolutely fine, even though 2 of those coaches are being pushed along. They're staying on the track fine. On an analog non-feedback controller though, this is struggling on the second radius curves. And with the 5-car train, it is managing fine. I don't think that's much of a problem. But again, with 3 times as many coaches, I can see this really struggling. I think on my setup, at least, these 4 draggy coaches are pretty close to the limit for this motor car. And even though you'd have 2 of the powered cars on a 14 coach train, that's still 6 coaches that each one's got to move. I think that'd be worse, not better, wouldn't it? And also, obviously, it is the powered car that is the most expensive part of this. So even though it wouldn't be that prototypical, I can imagine people wanting to just buy more of the cheaper non-powered coaches, which are better than 50% off at the moment, just to create a slightly longer train. Well, again, I don't think you could add too many more coaches than these 4 before things will really start to struggle. Obviously, if you had a feedback controller, I think that would be a different story. Also on DCC, that would probably be better, but even so, I think there's really only just enough power, and it doesn't surprise me at all that some people have had trouble with this. On, like I say, a large layout with sweeping curves and no gradients, you'd probably get away with it. On a more technical layout with tighter curves and gradients and such, at least on analog, it's going to be a problem. So if you've got one of these, if you have built up a larger train than I have, how did you get on with it? Please do share that with me down in the comments. Okay, let's talk about lighting then. So yeah, the directional lighting is awesome. We've got headlights on the front, which are nice and bright actually. I do like a good bright headlight, no way to miss these. And then in reverse, of course, you've got tail lights as well, so they work great. The interior lights are beautifully bright. In fact, let me shut the lights off. You can see here how bright those are. Really, really effective. You can't control these lights, unfortunately. Well, maybe you can on the driving trailers, but certainly with the intermediate coaches, I can't see any way that you could control these on DCC. Again, I could be wrong, please correct me if I am, but I can't see any switches on the thing, and there's no DCC socket on them as far as I can tell either. So the lights are on all the time. I don't think that's much of an issue though, and they do very nicely illuminate the interiors. And the really awesome thing about the interior lights is when you stop the train, they continue to illuminate, and that's because there's massive capacitors inside which keep the lights on for an unbelievable amount of time. Now the head and tail lights don't do it, they go out as soon as the power's cut, at least on analog. But yeah, for the interior lights, they stay on. I mean, the power's been cut now for a good while, they're still on. In fact, if I cut my light, hopefully you can see these are still on. In fact, I'll leave you there and I'll go and switch off the house lights and we'll see how long these last. Can you still see that? Yeah, you can. Oh, that's quite beautiful actually. Turn the camera up a touch. On it goes. Now obviously as time goes on, they get dimmer as the capacitors discharge, but for a 30-second stop at a station or something, you don't lose the lights. That's really, really fancy. So, this is an expensive set, but they have tried to give it some special features, and this is a really, really cool feature. So I'll let this discharge and then we'll start the train up again, because I suspect that it was charging those massive capacitors up which caused this to have such a rough start a minute ago. I think if you're starting it from cold, there's a chance that you'll get some pretty shoddy running until the capacitors have had a chance to charge. But yeah, I'll have to give it a minute and we'll see whether that's true or not. So I'll be back in a sec. Right, so the lights have gone off entirely, so I think the capacitors have drained. Let's now give it some power and see how it starts. So here we go, forwards direction, 50. No, it's fine, isn't it, that? Notice the lights are dimming quite a bit quicker now, so there must be some interesting circuitry on board, because when this was running for ages it took the lights a long time to dim, but now look, they're almost off now. So that's interesting. It seems the longer it runs then, the more those capacitors charge. So I reckon there must be some sort of resistor or other maybe charging circuitry that just limits the current that can rush into those capacitors, just so that you don't sort of kill the controller. So yeah, I mean, I thought it behaved weirdly when I first powered these coaches, but now they seem to be all right. So there you have it. Let's get this running and we'll enjoy it going along. Here we go. So look at this amazing train. It truly does look fantastic as it runs along. Always fancied getting one of these, and it is doing it for me. It really is. It looks so cool. Look at it. Just the shape, the 70s colouring, just everything about it is just epic. Didn't expect to be so enthusiastic about this, but I am. And I think the other thing is, I was just fearing that this was going to derail on my second radius curves. You know, my track's not the greatest in the world. I thought it'd just be a nightmare. So I'm actually pleasantly surprised that this is something I can run successfully without loads of problems. In fact, without any problems. Now, could the performance be better? Yes. I think the motor should have been a bit more powerful. I have got diesels that are heavier than this that can spin their wheels even under an obstruction. Something like that could have really served this train well. Also, yeah, the pickup solution's not the smartest, especially given the number of coaches you could potentially add to this train. A pickup solution with less drag, I think, would have been much better. But it's not much of an issue for the 5-car train. The motor car is just about powerful enough to haul these, even over second radius, without any problems. So for this pack specifically, I don't have a major problem. Overall though, very impressed with this. Let's have some ratings then for Hornby's, well, new 2 years ago, sorry for the delay, Class 370 APT. And I actually really enjoy this. I enjoy it much more than I was expecting to. Level of detail is really quite good. Now, it does rely quite heavily on moulded detail. There's not that many separately fitted parts, and I think this could have been a bit better where the bogies are concerned, also where some of the separately fitted handrails are concerned. And that's why I've not given it 5-star, but ultimately it's quite an outwardly simple looking train, so the fact that it's not covered in millions of separate parts is absolutely fine, I think. Also, it's got a lot of fancy features. It's got the lighting in almost every car. That's fantastic. It's got etched grills where they're necessary. It's got good quality moulding as well. That looks great. And of course, the paintwork is incredible. I think if there's one feature I had to say I liked the most about this pack, it would be the decoration. It is done brilliantly. Performance then, again, is much better than I was expecting. This is why I don't, well, I listen to what people tell me, but this is why I don't believe necessarily everything people tell me until I've tried a train on my own layout, because this was actually way better than I was expecting. Yes, it slows down on the second radius curves, or in fact all of the curves to an extent, but more so on the second radius. But it does not derail, the tilting works perfectly, and as a 5-car train, the power car is powerful enough to move it, which is great. It can also crawl brilliantly. The range of speeds is sensible, and when you turn that controller up, as I'm going to show you in just a second, so stay tuned, it can go at some impressive APT speeds. So it's good and realistic where that's concerned. Pulling power though isn't the greatest. It came in at 0.57 newtons of tractive effort, and it was really struggling at that as well. That's about 33 coaches on straight and level track. Obviously that's 33 coaches without draggy pickups. I think really you'd want to use 2 powered driving cars rather than 1 for a train really any longer than 5 or maybe 7 coaches, so keep that in mind. Mechanism is really good. I've given it 4-star, so it's got the proper bearings on the driving car at least, decent motor, not that powerful but decent, dual flywheels, pickups on every single wheel on the train, but I suppose this is where I will knock it down a star because the wiper pickups are just not a great choice for this train. Yeah, axle-based pickups would have been so much better. They would have reduced the drag so much in the train and allowed the power car to perform much better. So that's why it doesn't get a 5 on mechanism. Otherwise though, yeah, the mechanism's great, and I like the simplicity of the tilting mechanism. I think that is the key to this. If this was complicated and needed adjusting, this train would be a nightmare, but it's not. It's really, really good. Quality then, I've given 4-star. Now this is quite a plasticky train. The coaches particularly are very plasticky, no real die-cast construction on them, but I think that's fair enough. You don't want the coaches too heavy because then the drag would be even worse. The other thing with the quality was the pantograph. Just not good quality, that pantograph, very plasticky. Mine didn't spring properly. I think given the full price of this, things like that could have been better. Otherwise though, the build quality was excellent. The separate parts are nicely applied, no problem with it at all. So a good mark on quality. Value for money. So at £519.99, I do think this is a rip-off. Yes, you do get a lot for your money, so I think a relatively high price is to be expected, but at £519.99, I think that is pushing it a bit for what is in places quite a simple train pack. The breakdown works out as follows. That would be about £200 for the loco. That's a lot for the loco, given that there's no lights on it and very basic detailing, and it works out at about £80 each per coach. Now the coaches are good, but they're not that good in terms of the interior, although they do have lighting, so consider that. Still £80 though for a coach, that's very, very expensive. At the price I paid though, the current price, £295, it's a different story. I would give it 5-star at that price. The breakdown for that would look more like £130 for the loco. That's way better. Yep, it's worth that. And just over £40 each for the coaches, about £41. Well, that's a bargain. Really, really good. So 5-star at £295. I doubt they'll be around forever at that price. So if you're interested in one of these, I think I could recommend it. Do act now, affiliate links in the description if you want to, of course. Overall then, that is 7.63 out of 10, which is a grade of D. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm giving it a grade of D because I think it deserves it. I do love this train pack though, really, really enjoyed it. I'm just trying to be objective here. I think if it was going to get a higher grade from me, it would need a more reasonable price. That's not applicable right now because of the sale, but yeah, the RRP is too much. It would need a better pickup solution, a more powerful motor, a better quality pantograph, and a bit more attention to the interiors because the cab interior and the rest of the interiors aren't that great. And the fact that they're illuminated means that it's kind of noticeable that they're not that great. But yeah, overall, really good. Let's put this into the logbook. It's 13th place, so not far from the top 10, just above the Acura Scale Class 31 and below Rapido's Metropolitan E-Class. So all in all, now that the prices are lower, yes, I think I could recommend this. And even for me, who's not really an enthusiast for 1970s trains, I have to admit I am thoroughly enjoying this. I think it's something I can see myself running quite often. So there you have it, Hornby's APT, and this really is a lot of fun. I mean, I'm enjoying this. I can only imagine how much someone who actually experienced these in their heyday would enjoy this model. So yeah, pleasantly surprised all round. Really glad I finally managed to get one of these. Very, very pleased that I didn't just give up on it and not bother. But also, I'm glad I waited. I'm glad I didn't spend nearly £500 on this, because as good as it is, realistically, it's not worth that. But for less than 300, I'm perfectly happy, and I think it was worth every penny, actually. So pleasantly surprised. Well done, Hornby. I'm going to give them credit where credit's due. This is a damn good job, and that's the APT sorted, I would say. People were crying out for a good model of this for a long time, and finally, yeah, I think they got that. So thank you so much for watching. Comment down below, let me know what you think, and I'll catch you again very, very soon for another review. Alright, cheers folks, you take care.